So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nick Leeding. I am a... Sorry, can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay, Josh?
Yeah, that's all good.
Yeah, sorry. Right, so my name is Nick Leeding. I am a construction project manager by trade. And in the last few years, I have been working on my own developments and partnering on lots of developments and different things and sort of building up a whole web of companies around that. So my background originally was I did 11 years construction management for Taylor Wimpey Homes, and from that I worked from the bare bones, if you like. I came in as a trainee and worked all the way through running large projects which were all over Bedfordshire, Milton Keynes, Buckinghamshire, Cambridgeshire. We focused on all the different types of build that you can do within that parameters. So we had 2-bedroom flats up to 5-bedroom homes, detached, various stories, etc. like that. The sites range from 50-60 houses up to 200-300 plots over multiples of years. So from that, I built a wealth of experience of doing those different things, and the experiences that all come with that, and the problems that you're solving every day that build up that sort of character that you need to get that thick skin to get past all the problems that are in the construction world. From that, I've always wanted to do my own thing, and a few years back, I got to know Andy and Lloyd of Whitebox, and they were talking earlier, and obviously discussed me coming and doing some work with them. And for the last few years, I've been managing projects with them, and doing the training with them, and working with them on the mastermind side of things and the property development training company. And during that period, I've met numerous people who I've worked with in that sort of extent, and some have built relationships and set up and built our own sites. So we've taken it from theory to practice as doing the corporate stuff and now doing my own stuff. So I'm sort of that all-rounded thing. During the period when I was main contractor, I built my own place. I've had a buy-to-let portfolio, and we've been sort of gradually building that up over the years. But project management is my sort of fundamental thing that I do. The projects that I do now, so I'm on multiple projects. So the sort of list goes like this. So we've got 18 flats in a conversion, 28 houses on a new build site, 12 houses on a new build site. These are all running consecutively. I've got 4 houses down in Milton Keynes that we're building, 4 houses in March in Cambridgeshire we're building. We're doing another 3 down at Saffron Walden. I work in a multiple of ways. So in some ways, I'm the developer and main contractor. Some sites I'm the main contractor. Some sites I'm project manager. And then we do the training side and all that as well. We also manage our own properties. We have our small lettings company. So we sort of do the whole encompassing element. So to talk today about avoiding development disasters. So the idea behind that was to give you some idea for people who perhaps are new to developments, people who are perhaps doing it in a certain way and maybe could look at doing it in a different way moving forward. So the first things we were sort of going to look at, I've just put a little link in there. So on every page I've got, obviously this whole 3 days is about helping the NHS and the really good work that everyone on the front line of the NHS is doing at the moment, the key workers out there, keeping us all safe, doing their bit to try and beat this little vermin of this COVID-19 scenario. So again, there's a link on every page to try and do our bit to try and push on for the fundraising. So first thing we look at, I'm going to look at, with regards to sort of avoiding issues on developments. Correct budgeting. When we're looking at budgeting a site, let's try and look at all the different elements. The elements that are relevant to the development itself, the elements that are relevant to the construction, the elements that are relevant to the funding. So when we're originally assessing that site, get as much detail as you can. So from that, you're getting the planning drawings, you're getting the history of what might have been on that site. There might have been a completely flat, clean area, but you go back on Google Earth 5 years ago on Google Street View and find there was a mechanic's garage on there, and some rogue has cleared away everything, perhaps not dealt with the contaminants correctly. You go and do some ground surveys later on, find something's not quite what you think it might be. Maybe that's going to catch you out quite a bit. So as much detail as possible, do as much digging, speak to neighbours perhaps. So perhaps you're looking at a site in a certain area and one of the old boys happens to be leaning on a fence chatting to someone. Have a chat with them, understand the nature of what's happened on that bit of land in the past. Locals love to talk. Obviously there's sometimes people's opinions that might not be the greatest, and they'll give you information that's completely null and void, but get as much for understanding of it as possible. You know, we're doing a site up in Cumbria, and a couple of locals kept saying as they were walking past, oh look, there's asbestos on that site, there's asbestos on that site. And we've done all the reports on the site in certain specific areas, but when they do these stage 1 reports, they don't perhaps go, they do sample trial pits in 5 areas, let's say, for example. But in this one specific area, this local had told us that there was a concentrated section of asbestos. And lo and behold, when we did a small amount of excavation under sort of safe practice manners, we found that there was indeed traces as we started scraping back. So we had it properly investigated, treated, dealt with, which was significantly expensive, but we found that that was indeed there, but you would never know. It was under a car park and it was mitigated. But the point of the matter is, if you can find out some information early on, try to do it. Try to find out some information early on as to what's going on. Go to the companies such as Soil Technics. Soil Technics are a company down in our way, which Cambridgeshire, Bedfordshire, Northamptonshire area, and they test the ground to see what contaminants might be there. They'll look into all the geographical elements, all the ground makeup, all that sort of thing, to try and sort of mitigate any potential issues for you. So detail, reports. So structural reports. So let's say you're doing a commercial conversion. Find out if there's any previous reports been done. See if you can take someone there on a viewing. It may be a little expense at the beginning, but it might cost you a lot of, save you a lot of money in the longer run. So maybe look at utilising specific structure engineers and things like that. I then look at estimates from different builders, and 2 different people could come in on a project at completely different prices. You could send your building drawings, your planning drawings, to a pair of contractors, and one contractor could come in at say £100,000 and another contractor could come in at £200,000. Why is that? Well, there's a whole multitude of reasons. One guy might really need the work but has very low overheads, and another guy has high overheads, doesn't need the work. Has one guy might have allowed for every element 1, 2, 3 and 4, but building guy 2 might have allowed for 1, 2 and 4 and missed 3. So there's as much information as you can give people to get quotes back, then give them the information to try and get everyone on the same sort of wavelength. So giving out specifications are a good thing to build up initially for when you're starting to put a plot together, a site together, trying to build up a contract. So therefore, specify exactly what you need. Look at the fabric of the building, look at the skirting board you're going to put in, the doors you're going to put in, the sanitary ware you're going to put in, all the information that you can give someone to quote through is going to really sort of help you get along the way. Because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're getting what you think you're getting, and that the builder's going along a path that you'd like him to go down, rather than going off on some crazy tangent and putting in gold-plated everything when you're expecting a rental spec property and that it's going to be of a relative level. So when we're looking at correct budgeting, we look at the specification of what it is, the contractors, the estimates that they're putting in, QS reports. Now, quantity surveyors are very much invaluable in when you look at getting properties and projects priced. They're going to give you a relative level to work to be able to then build up a budget from that point. And if your project's of a nature where you need to go for funding, maybe you don't, but in most cases, a lot of people will need funding. You're going to find that the funding provider will do a quantity surveyors or a monitoring surveyors report prior to completing on the funds for you. So therefore, you're going to get checked at the back end. So let's get it checked at the front end to make sure you're right before you put your figures in. It's all right and well and good giving initial figures to a funding partner, perhaps, to be able to then get the funds started to be in place. But as stuff starts to progress, definitely get those quantity surveyor reports in, get those things evaluated fully, and then you can back it up with quotes from builders, etc. Now, quantity surveying quotes might not always be 100% perfect because they don't have every detail. For example, they will allow you an estimate for the foundations, but that goes back to the reports that you might get with regards to foundation design and ground levels, ground contaminants, that sort of thing. And bear in mind this as well, when you're going to much detail as possible, you need to know what the fabric of the build will be later on and all the side of things from that. Discuss that with your architect. So that's the sort of first initial steps you can look at. So the correct budgeting, get as much detail as possible, reports, estimates, QS reports, set up a specification, range of contractor quotes, roads, etc. Just flip on to the next one. So that just, it does have a little bit of delay on this Facebook thing, I noticed. So the next thing I'd look at is reading the drawings, okay? When you're setting up site and making sure that people are doing the right thing, understand and get people to read and check the drawings. Make sure people actually understand what you are giving them and the schedule that you're giving them of the properties that they're going to create. For example's sake, I have seen it in even the large corporate scenarios. People have got houses the wrong way around. People have given the wrong handings to people. So for example's sake, what we in the construction terms, for anyone who doesn't know, we have what we call handings on houses. So you might have a drawing of a house, which is shaped in an L shape, and with the L to the right, for example, that is as handed. And you might have that exact same house, flipped mirror image with the L to the left, and that is what's known as handed. So therefore you've got as and opposite handed, as handed. And I've known it that people get the wrong version of the wrong drawing and they'll go out and put the other handed house in there. And I've seen that happen. I've seen that on sites. I've seen the repercussions of those things happening. So let's try and get those sort of things right from the word go. Make sure people, you sit down and you have decent, noted, minuted pre-start meetings with your different teams. You have ongoing site meetings. You don't just go out there, take a few snaps, have a little look around. Make sure you actually go into the detail, because that's where it can really start to cost people money. And that is one of the big things that can be a disaster if things go wrong. Even such a thing as, I remember I don't drop names, but I remember a main builder site where it was a square house, and rather than having the if you imagine a normal triangle apex roof, the front, you just look at it, all you can see is tiles, the gables are the triangles, and then the rear tiles again. Well, this roof, rather than going up and over, it was gable on. So they'd literally put the square house roof 90 degrees in the wrong way. So therefore, the whole thing had to be taken off. And at that point, they hadn't realised until the scaffold was down, and that was a real big cock up. So therefore, things like that, just correct drawings, and that is the next thing. Is you look at, architects will often do drawing issues and drawing issue revision lists, and you'll find that when you start on a drawing, when you start on a site, you might be on revision A, which is sometimes usually much later than that by the time you even get on site. So you have revision A when you start on site, and revision A is the first amendment of that drawing. And as stuff progressed, you might need to change a detail, and that'll be revision B. And then there'll be some sort of feedback on structural engineer or something like that, revision C. And revision D will come along, and revision E, and so on and so forth. And what you can do is very, very quickly, you can find that for house 1, you're on revision A, house 2, you're on revision C, house 3, you're on revision G, because little amendments have had to come along and there's slight different changes that have had to happen. And you can find that when you're sending out the drawings, you could be sending out revision B when everyone else is working to revision F or G. So there's a very good important lesson to be learned in making sure that everyone's got the right up-to-date revisions and that there's a track record behind that. So with your site meetings, you could say, right, everyone, have you all looked at the drawing issue file, and are you all on revision G? Because that's where we're at this stage at the moment. This is a photo I took only last week, and my electricians have clearly made a slight mistake there. These are minimal things that you can deal with, but what happened here is the electrician had read the drawing wrong, and he'd marked up the double socket and the TV point in the wrong place, which meant he'd had to cut holes. And as you can see from the picture, although it's small probably on your screens, the double socket has moved about 400 mil to the right, the TV socket's moved about 100 mil to the left, and it's just a mess. And then you have to make good the walls, things like that. But I'd like to say that was one place that's happened, and that's pretty much all that happened. But you get an amount of that happening per house, as much as you try and do, because tradesmen are tradesmen, and there'll be little details they'll get wrong all the way through the project. But that's the nature of the beast and how things end up working when you're on site. So the main point I wanted to get across was read the drawings, understand how the site's layout, but make sure fundamentally your people who are constructing that site for you know how to do that themselves. I see in the comments from Gareth Thomas there, but Nick, professionals, builders and trades shouldn't be making these errors. If you know the construction trade like I do, Gareth, you'll know full well that everyone, whoever they are, yourself possibly included, are going to make an error on somewhere along the line. As best as you can, to the best of your abilities, there will always be someone making an error somewhere along the line. But the more we can do to try and have meetings to minimise those areas, record the information, try and make sure everyone's updated with sharing folders, sharing files, sharing that, and hopefully you try to mitigate those problems along the route. But yeah, nature of the beast, these things happen, and mitigating them is the way forward. So I'll just move on to the next slide of bits I've got. So the next thing I was sort of looking at for construction disasters, sort of development disasters, trying to avoid it, what are you building next to? So you may look at a site, and as someone who's perhaps not done a huge amount of developments before, might look at a site and think, that's fine. What could be wrong with that? What could be a problem there? And I've had people come to me and say, I'd like to build this. I said, okay, yeah, sure. Have you noticed what that's next to? And they'll say, no. I said, well, that's a railway, that. Or it's a petrol station, or there's an electric transformer there. These things can really, really impact the timescales that you're building in, the cost of what you're building, and the nature of it. I have got one site which I'm building next to a railway, and the back of one of the houses is less than 10 metres away from the actual track line, and it's also on a gentle slope as well, and there's quite a steep bank next to it. And so as a result, we had to get what the Royal Network Rail called a BAPA, which is a monitoring order put in place. There's a lot of hurdles you have to go through for that, and a lot of cost basis from hiring professionals to do the Network Rail side of things, from paying the actual monitoring fees, and obviously keeping things on track for them with Network Rail, and making sure that they are happy with what you're doing and that you're not causing any problems. Because if I think on that particular site, if we were to delay a train by a minute, it's something like a £20,000 a minute fine, which if you think one roofer could leave some paper, some cardboard, some packaging on the scaffold, it could blow off very quickly, land on that train line and delay the train, and potentially cause a lot of headaches and a lot of problems for everyone on that train and things like that. So we want to really avoid that at all costs. So these are things to really think about when you're looking at that. So get advice from people who know if you do not know yourself. So be cautious when you're looking at buying a site next to something like a railway or busy roads even. As a bottom of that slide sort of says, when you are doing your planning and when you've got your planning conditions, a lot of the time the planning conditions will stipulate that there will have to be a traffic management plan in place, a construction phase plan, okay? And these are documents that are set out to talk about the physical nature of the site, how you're getting stuff into that site, how you're getting stuff out of that site, what time the site is operating, who's operating, how you're managing the control of dirt from your site going out onto roads, how you're washing the wheels of vehicles, how you're doing everything around that site. Now, if you're trying to do a traffic management plan for a railway, next to a railway, sorry, or you're doing it on a busy road, it's going to be quite involved, and that's something you could quite easily get caught out on. And so therefore, again, hiring the right people to try and help you get through this and mitigate these scenarios is going to be worth their weight in gold. Not sort of pat myself on the back too much with the old project management side there, but basically, yeah, understand the different elements that you need to. It's all well and good wanting to make $1 million on a building site, but this is not an easy strategy when you've got a lot of things like these different elements in play. These are very basic ways of looking at it, because obviously we can't go into a huge amount of detail in the 45-minute slot, but these are the fundamental things you should sort of think about, and things that I've seen that can get you very much caught out in the bigger time. What's that comment there? Sorry, from Matthew. I've heard the saying, double the cost and triple the time in project management. Double the cost and triple the time, but yeah, so Matthew, I've heard the saying, double the cost and triple the time in project management. Is this something you agree with? I wouldn't have said double the cost and triple the time, but yeah, whenever I build a program, I try to factor in every eventuality that might come along. And I don't always get it right, because in reality, there's curveballs that you won't expect with some things, like development company, finance companies pulling out the market, and you have to go through the whole rigmarole of redoing that, or a planning condition that you thought would get released fairly quickly, and you're going through your pre-start conditions, you get all that side of things in play, and then this one sticky wicket they don't answer and don't respond, and that means you can't progress into the next section, and that's something you can definitely lose track of time on. But tripling the time maybe a bit. So perhaps I don't agree with that entirely, but Matthew, you are completely right in some respects. It's very hard to quantify a construction budget exactly. You try your best to do it, and timescales very much do fluctuate on what you initially plan to do. Yeah, so that's a fair point, to be fair, mate. So back to the what are you building next to? Busy roads again. Make sure that when you're managing a site next to busy roads, you've got all the correct things, like hoarding perhaps, or a way of getting in and out of that site where there's vision displays. So you do not want a vehicle flinging out of your site and not being able to see left or right into that road. You look at things like vision displays, traffic management plans, and getting stuff into place so that you mitigate every circumstance, because ultimately, when you're a developer, when you're in construction, you are liable for the work that you are doing, and there is a potential legal issue there if you do not do these things correctly. So the next thing I was going to look at, avoiding development disasters type scenario. Don't scrimp on safety. Okay, I'll just wait for that one to load up. A lot of people look at different, I see a lot of the time people sharing photos on Facebook, sharing photos on Instagram of their lovely build project that's going on, and you just cringe and you think to yourself, I know I know I am not perfect, and I know that managing 6 to 8 sites or 10 sites, whatever we might have on, I can't watch everyone all the time. And we have site managers who are experienced, they're trained, they know the score, and yet there will still be tradesmen who will be out there doing something daft, and we catch them at it and we ask them to do it in a better manner. We try and educate We try to mitigate anything we can. We do toolbox talks, which is a basic way of getting a message across on a, let's say HSE bring out a guideline. The health and safety executives say to you, right, you should do this in a certain way. You should wear this piece of protective equipment. Now we all go to the trades that are doing that specific job and we'll say to them, right, do it this way. Please do that. Sign this to say you're agreeing to do it this way. And 10 minutes later, you'll go around the corner and you'll find that guy doing the exact same thing he was doing without that bit of protective. So you have to go through that again, or you might ask him to leave, or whatever you do. I see people sharing pictures on Facebook, Instagram, and they're really proud of their developments, and that's great. And I'm really loving the fact that people are succeeding and doing well. But they've got a picture of a bloke behind them cutting with perhaps a petrol disc cutter, and there's a plume of cloud of smoke going up from all the dust, and they've not got any masks on their face, and not ear protectors, eye protectors. Please, please understand the law and your responsibility as a developer, as a person who's putting those people in potential risk, to be able to understand that if those people do hurt themselves and you've not got the correct procedures in place, risk assessments, method statements, as a site safety file where people know where they can go and get the information to deal with a problem, you could have a big problem on your hands. I've just put a couple of daft little extracts on here. Developer fined 600k for white finger outbreak. Housing developer fined for lack of interest in safety. I'd love to see some of those pictures on Instagram. Those people realise the issue that they're potentially going to face if someone was to see that in a more professional circumstance. Just make sure that you've got the right amount of kit on site for the right people that you've got on site. For example's sake, have you got a working toilet? Have you got somewhere to wash your hands? Is it got hot and cold running water? Are those facilities completely covered in absolute mess, rubbish? Are they clean? Are they managed? Has your guys got a decent amount of PPE on? PPE is in the news every 2 minutes at the moment. NHS PPE, this PPE, 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 PPE. But PPE, I've been dealing with for all my working life in a scenario. And when your guy is cutting with a petrol steel saw, he should have, by sort of legal senses and his own conscience, a face mask on. He should have eye protectors on, because you can't really change eyeballs. I expect you can probably get under some massive, amazing new transformation technology, a new eyeball, but you don't really want to go down that line. You don't want to look into that. You can only replace these things once if you can replace them. So let's try not to have that problem ever happening. Do you want to be the person that said, oh man, someone lost his eyeball today on my site? Personally, I've never known anyone in the construction time I've worked in who's been on a development that I've been involved with, or in a company I've worked with, who's had any accident that's been life-threatening. I've seen cuts, scrapes. I've seen a couple of dislocated shoulders where people have pulled themselves on roofs and stuff like that. I had one old boy back when I just started as site manager. I think it was 2004 or 5, something like that. And rather than stick to the rules, he decided he was going to grab something off a container that the forklift had boomed up there. So it got up there with a forklift and it was on a pallet. So it was safe in that sense. And it was, I think it was a pack of timber. And he just wanted one of the lengths of that. So he got a ladder, just propped it against the container. And then he went to go and get this bit of wood. It slipped and he landed on his shoulder popped out. He was off work for 6 weeks. He was an older chap, and obviously the older you get, the slower you recover when you do damage yourself. So if he'd have had the correct training, he'd respected the correct training, because I'm not saying we didn't train him correctly. If he'd respected the training and not gone up on the container and got his own ladder and done that, and just used the ladders that were tied in position or fixed on the scaffolding, that sort of thing, then that hopefully would have been avoided. But these things do happen, and these things can happen. The nature of people, lazy people who who cut corners and don't want to stick to the rules, that sort of thing, you're going to find these things all along. I've lost count the amount of times I've walked around a corner and found someone doing something daft, and you've had to have a bit of a sit down talk with them and try and work it out. I used to have a director at the large corporate company I worked with. He had a almost zero tolerance policy. His education was getting rid of someone instantly if they saw something that wasn't right. He was a very intense character, and he basically would, if he said, if he's, I remember one time we were working on some show homes, and one of these guys who were working on them came out of the show home into the sort of main build area, and he'd forgotten to put his hard hat on. It was a complete no tolerance scenario. He would have had to wear that hard hat the moment he was outside the property. We didn't used to make them wear them inside the properties on a new build house because they were working in what we would say was a safer environment inside the house. But the minute you went outside the house, you had to put your hat on. And he went outside, and I was stood with this director, and he said, "Nick, you need to lose him." And I went, "No, he's walked out the house, and he's just realised you almost comically watched him put his hand to his head, walk back inside the house and get it. And then he came back out with it. He said, no, you need to make an example of him." And I was like, wow. And this guy did lose his job that day because he forgot to wear his hard hat for 2 minutes. I feel that was probably a little intolerant and a little unfair. And so I would rather educate people, because if you've got people who are working with you and they know the rules, they've been educated, and even that guy, he knew the rule, he just forgot it for a second. If you can work with these people and build rapport and build a team about people who actually care what you think and want to work together to the same sort of direction, then you're going to build a much better team, aren't you? So try and educate people, try and work with them. I've seen on the comments just a second ago, someone said, I had this, so Jed Wilmot, he said, I've had this with PPE, I'm guessing. I told the builder to wear goggles, but he laughed it off. It stops working for you, Jed. The bottom line is, mate, if they're not going to respect themselves, they're not respecting you, and they're going to end up causing you more of a problem eventually. And you need to enforce that scenario. A way of enforcing that scenario, which obviously people say, oh, it's hard to get through. Start finding them. Start saying, well, I'm not paying you X amount. That's a solution. I'm not saying it's the best solution. Fining, shaming, that sort of thing, but just educate, and try to get to the point where people do respect the rules that you have in place and the way that you're working. Because let's say, Jed, that that guy did hurt himself, he did get something in his eye. Who's he going to come after when I was working on Jed's site? And can you argue, could you hand on heart today say you had a bit of paper that he'd signed to say that he was going to wear his goggles, and then another day later when you'd caught him, let's say first time, you'd made him sign another risk assessment or a toolbox talk to say, oh, I'm going to wear them and apologise, and etc. And it's noted in a diary, because a diary can be held in a court of law. You could say, oh, actually, I did tell him once, I told him twice, I told him 3 times, and then I personally wouldn't get to 3 times. I'd ask the guy to leave. But I would try to educate him. I would try to show him how to do it and try to build that team, build that rapport. But you can sometimes tell quite quickly with certain people that you're not going to get very far. It is tricky when you're contracted to people, but as part of a contract, they need to uphold the health and safety side of it. And the health and safety side of it is paramount in my eyes. And it's something that needs to be totally monitored. Just I think there's a question coming there. So Michael Collins, if it's a small single refurb and a builder doesn't wear his PPE, gets hurt, who is liable? So if the builder, right, so even a small single refurb, if they are, let's say there's 2 ways of looking at it. So I'll talk about it in a commercial sense. The HSE recognises that any project nowadays that is not just an extension to someone's home or a domestic product, is commercial, should be notified under F10 notification. If you Google that, hse.gov.uk, F10 notification, it will be a notifiable project, so therefore comes under full CDM. Even a domestic extension comes under CDM. Now there's different levels of liability. if you've shown reasonable due diligence and you've done the right legal things to show that you've had them get, like I say, a risk assessment in place, a method statement, they've got their own public liability insurance, and you've checked this. Basically, the liability would lie with them if you've done it correctly. But if you have not provided these things, if he's working for you direct and you've not provided him PPE, things like the liability could absolutely lie with you. So it's sort of a bit of a vague answer, but there's a lot of different ways of answering that because I don't know the full terms of that exact question. So if you wanted to contact me direct, we can have a little talk about that if that would help you. Jed, Wilma, I know how important this all is now, having read the CDM regs. This will never happen on our sites again. Ignorance is no excuse. Exactly the same as Jed. So ignorance is no excuse, and fair play, mate. And that's the only thing. I'm not here to tell everyone they're doing it wrong. I'm not here to try and say I'm doing it perfectly right. That is not the absolute case. I do the best I can with the budgets that we have sometimes, because that is a restricted thing in comparison to, say, the Taylor Wimpeys of this world. But even so, I'll say this quite confidently. There are other large-scale developers out there who don't take health and safety quite as seriously, and they're on a par with Taylor Wimpey. And you have two sites across the road from each other. One's like bloody Bedlam, Beirut war zone, and one's a very well-refined site. And you can see that even in the bigger types. So not everyone does it right, and we're not perfect every time. And there's people that catch us out, but we try to do the right thing with what we can do when we can do it. So I'll just scooch on to the next slide. So another way of avoiding development disasters. These slides do take a moment to catch up. Anyway, JVs, joint ventures. JVs, joint ventures can be a great thing. They can be a fantastic way of creating a team. Let's say you've got one experienced guy who, let's say, can build anything you like. You give him a blank piece of land, he'll build you anything you want, and it'll be fantastic. But he doesn't have a great finance side of things, whereas another part of the team has great finance background and can run all the legals, the funding, everything like that. They team together and they do everything, and they go forth and multiply, as it were, in House's sense. And that is a fantastic way, and that's how a lot of the things that I do work. Basically, JVs can be a bit of a bad thing. You are going to get into a domestic relationship with these people in a roundabout way. I just want you to make sure you know who you're getting into bed with. Do your due diligence about that person. Learn about that person. Learn about their history, the background, what they've done before. Communicate, talk regularly. A mistake that I've made on one of my projects was I perhaps didn't totally get involved with one of the partners, and that mistake cost the relationship in the end because information didn't get passed across, and that was a negative thing. And that's something to really try and avoid. Talking all the time, telling each other what's going on, diarise regular events to understand and see how the progress of the project is going and work from there. So communication is key, understanding who each other are and working with that. So how not to do it: do not just jump into bed with anyone. JVs are a great thing, but please, please, please understand who you're getting into bed with. And the last slide I was going to look at for things to talk about is GDVs. Now, obviously at the moment with this whole COVID-19 thing going on, we don't really know, and there's lots of people who were talking earlier and they're giving their estimations and their market predictions and stuff like that, and that could happen. And they are very, very educated people, and that's going to be great, but they don't always know exactly. So please, please, when you're looking at your valuations at the moment, especially GDVs, how you're going to sell the properties, etc., never work with hope value. Please be realistic, down value especially. If you're selling a house for, say, 300,000, put it at 270. See how it works, stress test it. Because remember, if you don't stress test anything yourself, your funder's going to stress test it. Your funder's going to say, no, I'm not lending X amount against it. I don't believe it's going to be worth it. And when they have the valuations done, they're going to stress test it. So please ensure that you have these things in place and that you know what the score is really. Don't go with hope value. So Andy and Lloyd, when they spoke earlier, they did give us a quick 5 minutes on this as well. We are creating a project management masterclass. The intention behind this is to give everyone the tools they need to be able to look at how they're going to do projects themselves and the right way of doing it. And we're building up this. It's not an easy one, this course, to create, because there's so many different ways and so many different things that are built up into a project. But we felt it was something, after a lot of market research and a lot of people saying to us, oh, I've got a problem with this, I've got a problem with that. We thought that maybe instructional videos on how to deal with certain problems, the phasing of how you do certain things prior to starting a site and how you run things during a site, things to check for, that sort of thing. This would be very much a beneficial thing that people have been asking us for. So there's a link at the top of the screen, the bit.ly whitebox PBM 2020, it's easy for me to say. And this is all about how to access that, register your interest. It's something we've got coming soon, so just thought we'd talk about it at the end. Josh has been messaging me to wrap up, so I'll be off in a second, Josh, apologies. And so that's that. Again, if you wish to contact me, if you find there's anything you'd like me to help you with on a project management basis, you've got a little construction issue, these are some of the places you could find me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and email. And I'd just like to thank everyone for joining us today, everyone who's donating, Josh and Alice for putting this on, and all the other speakers. And thank you for your time.